This episode of Pomcast is sponsored by Chrysalis Yarn Company, a one-woman hand-dyed studio owned by Mindy in Dallas, Texas. Mindy's small batch studio offers artisan hand-dyed yarns in playful, enthusiastic colours, from the brightest neon rainbow hues to the moodiest tonals.
Mindy strives to offer more than just pretty yarn, though. Chrysalis Yarn Company is about inspiration as well as aspiration. It's about unlocking the creative capacities in every fibre enthusiast.
Taking soft and delicate strands of promise, Mindy transforms them into twisted hanks of art through the magic of colour. She asks you to imagine the incredible potential of each unique skein. You are the architect of its imaginative transformation.
Visit chrysalisyarns.com or Chrysalis Yarns Co. on Instagram to see Mindy's amazing skeins. Naturally, we're thinking of issue 40, and we're totally enamoured with their new Dreamscape collection, which shares the same theme as our latest issue. We can just imagine a pair of Revelry socks in the pastel sugar and daydream colourways.
Chrysalis Yarns, where every skein is a chrysalis bursting with potential. What will yours become? Hello, and welcome to Pomcast, the podcast brought to you by Pom Pom Quarterly. My name is Lydia Gluck, and I am here with the wonderful podcast co-hosts, Sophie Heath-Scott. Hello, Sophie.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi, I'm very excited. I was wonderful. Thank you.
You're always wonderful.
Oh, so are you.
Oh, thanks, man.
And all you listeners, you're wonderful too. Hi.
Hi. Yes, all the Pomcats. So today we have an interview with one of our pom-pom contributors, Aimee Sher, whose incredible jumper design with beautiful lace and frill is called Effervescent and is the cover star of our latest issue 40.
Yeah, we're so excited to have Aimee on the Pomcast. This occasion, you were the solo interviewer.
I was, which was unusual. We missed you, of course, Sophie, but we had a wonderful time, Aimee and I, chatting about their design for issue 40, the aforementioned cover star, but also how they got into designing and all sorts of other things. They're an incredibly interesting and thoughtful person. And so I know that you're going to really enjoy, you Pomcats are going to really enjoy the interview as much as I did.
And I can't wait to listen. Thanks for taking the lead on that one.
My pleasure. And we've mentioned issue 40 quite a lot already, so it's probably useful for us to say that you can now buy it from LYS's. Hooray!
Hooray! As well as from Pom Pom. But yes, if you have a local yarn store, or maybe not local, you order online. I hear that's the thing these days.
That's what all the kids are doing.
Yeah, you can also get it from them. So we're really happy that the spring issue is out in the world, springing out into the world, making everyone's knitting dreams come true.
It is, and the weather is even getting slightly springier post triple storm.
Yes,
it's a lot of wind here.
A lot of wind here, to say it lightly.
Unlike the wind, which was not light. And what else has happened? Oh yes, we were at Unravel very recently, the lovely knitting festival / get together in Farnham in the UK, which was the first knitting festival that Pom Pom ever attended.
Oh. Indeed, yeah. And for the UK staff, it was the first one we have been to for a long time, since the Unravel happened at the very beginning of 2020, and then we all know what happened then. So yeah, huge thank you to all the organisers and people behind the scenes and all the exhibitors, all the stands. It was great to see so many familiar faces and see new faces that we've only seen via email. And for everyone who came to the stand, said hi, said that they loved the Pomcast. We had Ali, who's a long-time Pomcat, who brought us some mini eggs. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that's a thing.
It is a thing, and it's always so welcome. Ali is just, what a lovely thing to do, and it was so nice, considering especially that it was, this first show back, which was quite a big deal for us, and then to have the warm hug of mini eggs brought to us was wonderful, and it was really great seeing lots of yarn in real life, which I haven't done for quite a while, except for obviously the yarn that lives with me in my house. But it was nice to see some external yarn.
External yarn.
But yes, we had a wonderful time. But we should get back to the interview time.
Yeah, we'll have more armchair chat. I like that phrase. I think I'm going to try and keep that. We'll keep coming up with a new name for those kinds of episodes every couple of months or something. Yeah, we'll have more chat about Unravel next episode. But yeah, like you say, Lydia, onto the interview. Let's hear from Aimee.
Hi, so I am here today with Aimee Sher, who has a beautiful design, which will be in our spring issue this year. And when you're listening to this podcast, it's possible that you have a copy in your hand, in which case I would say, have a look at the cover. And that is the pattern that that Aimee designed for us. And I'm really excited to speak to Aimee today. So hello, Aimee.
Hi, Lydia. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. We're really, well, I say we because, of course, normally Sophie will be with me, but she couldn't make it for the interview today. But I and us as a pom-pom team are very excited to have you on the Pomcast. So before we get started, I'll just ask you to do a little introduction, if you don't mind, for our listeners. Just tell them a little bit about yourself and your design style.
Sure. My name is Aimee Sher. I am a knitting designer and spinner and knitting teacher. My pronouns are she and they, and I am currently living in St. Louis, but I grew up in Taiwan. It's a little island country in Asia, which recently became famous because of the pandemic, but and also Los Angeles. So I kind of spent my life across two countries, and that's kind of something that really informs many of my designs, but especially this one.
Great. So, of course, pom-pom is many things, but it is in many ways primarily a knitting and craft publication. So I think a lot of people listening will be interested to know about your earliest memory of knitting and also when you started designing.
My earliest memory of knitting is my grandma never stopped knitting. And actually, her day job was a crochet pattern designer for a factory. So there was like a little factory of women who would make crocheted garments. And she was the one who would workshop the patterns and design them. And I learned absolutely nothing from her because we lived so far apart. But she would bring me really scratchy sweaters. I remember just being itchy, and then being in Los Angeles, she would say like, "Oh, Los Angeles in America, that's so cold. I've got to knit you sweaters," and I never wore them because it's Los Angeles. So that was my earliest memory. I didn't learn to knit until I was an adult, actually only a few years ago. So I picked it up just because I started buying sweaters for my little one. Her name is Kaylee, and at the time she was a baby. And I wanted her to be a little bit warmer, like all parents do. But I couldn't find a lot of affordable natural fiber sweaters. That's really how this started. Was there was so much acrylic, and I felt like really bad that I was spending my whole budget on sweaters that were not going to keep her as warm as I wanted to. And I wanted to also learn how to knit Fair Isle sweaters. So that's how I kind of jumped into knitting.
Oh, so it's been really not that long then since you started knitting, and yeah. But you telling me about your grandmother being a crochet designer reminds me. My mum always tells me that my great grandmother, so her grandmother, used to be was a professional knitter who knit things for Rowan. And then, yeah. So, I mean, she would like make the samples, I guess. So she was like a sample knitter. And my mom was just like, I've never seen anyone knit so fast.
That's amazing to know that you kind of had that connection, and that maybe that your craft can connect you in previously unknown ways to your ancestors.
Yeah. And it's nice, because I never met my great grandmother. So it's kind of nice just to know that we've got that in common, even if we never got to meet in person.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Wow. So you picked it up as an adult. And so when you started designing, was that kind of from the get-go? Like, did you just sort of dive in because you knew what you wanted, or was it a bit of a kind of process of making and then going on to design?
So I started designing only last year. I was hosting a podcast called a knit along called the Knit Diverse Knit Along in 2021 in the spring, because I really wanted to compile lists of all the makers I admire who might be from traditionally marginalized communities, LGBTQIA community members and people of color. And halfway into the knit along, my friend Jen from 626 Yarn dyed up this gradient set for socks. Inspired by the gradient you get in Thai tea when you pour the condensed milk and the tea together, and there's a little gradient. And because of the rise of hate crimes against Asian Americans during that period, followed by a shooting in Atlanta, we wanted to support our own community because we're both Asian American. So I designed a sock pattern called the Boba Time pattern with her Thai tea set. And we raised funds from the proceeds of the set of the kits to a fundraising project for Asian sex workers. And we were able to raise $500. And that was really the only reason I jumped into designing. But once I did, I couldn't stop. And one of the very next things I sketched was a sock pattern that would actually go on to become the Effervescent Pullover that's in this issue of Pom Pom.
Sounds like a powerful way to start your design career, and it sounds like raising that money, like what an important cause to be donating to. And I'm glad that that knitting can help contribute to things like that. I think that's really one of the wonderful things about the craft community.
That's one of my favorite things about the craft community, for sure, is that whenever something happens to a particular subset of the community, there's so many parts of the community that will just band together and support those who are in need right now. And I think that's really lovely.
And so you mentioned the Effervescent Pullover that is, of course, the cover star for issue 40. And we are so thrilled to have the design as part of the issue. And we're really excited for people to have it in their hands and to make it. So we'd love to talk a little bit more about that design. Just a bit about the concept behind the design and any tips for people who have added it to the top of their to knit list.
Sure. The Effervescent Pullover was pitched to you at Pom Pom as a sock pattern because that's what I was designing at the time. And it was inspired by the Boba Time socks, which was a Thai tea gradient sock with little bubble pearls. For those who are not familiar, boba is tapioca-based little jelly morsels of deliciousness that we put in iced tea. So when you drink the iced tea with a giant straw, you get like a multi-sensory experience. And this pullover was inspired by a different type of bubble tea, a different topping. So aside from bubble tea, Taiwanese people have found 1,001 ways to drink tea. And one of those ways is that we have turned cream cheese and whipped cream into a whipped topping. So it's kind of like having a sip of cream cheese, like of cheesecake with your tea. So it's like an afternoon tea in a cup.
That sounds amazing.
Delightful. It's great.
So
we like to mix and match toppings. So you can also add like flan or, boba pearls or anything in combination with the cream topping. So it's just one of those things that we've invented and we really ran with it, and we're very proud of it. The cream cheese topping is what inspired this pullover. I wanted something that combined a leafy lace motif, which would recall the tea leaves that we grow in the high mountains of Taiwan, along with a contrast mohair ruffle. a texturally contrasted mohair ruffle to represent the cream tea, and I wanted it to be strawberry flavor, featuring this beautiful yarn by Geraldine's Yarn at the Wandering Flock. When I saw this yarn, it screamed strawberry milk tea to me, and that's really where this design started to take off.
Amazing. I think in the UK, I think I've heard boba mainly called bubble tea. So I don't know if anyone listening might.
I think that is regional.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I love bubble tea, but I've never had what you're describing with the cream cheese topping, and I'm going to have to figure out if there's somewhere I can get it around here because it sounds so delicious.
I think that might also be regional. So it's one of those things where growing up in Los Angeles, I was really hyper aware of these kinds of food and drink trends that were coming over from Taiwan, because there's such a huge population of Taiwanese Americans in Los Angeles. And I really do miss that. But we do have cream cheese bubble tea here, and I will be buying some on launch day so I can enjoy it with my magazine.
Amazing. Yes, that sounds like absolutely the right combination. Oh, lovely. Yes, you mentioned Geraldine of Wandering Flock. The yarn used in the sample that's on the cover is her yarn, and it's such gorgeous stuff. I can totally see why it kind of captured exactly what you're going for with this one, and we're very pleased to have Geraldine's work also involved in this design.
Her work for the magazine previously was really inspiring too. So I was just really inspired by her work, like her body of work generally.
Yeah. She makes such beautiful things, like her designs and of course her yarns are just, we always have a blog post or kind of show notes to go along with the podcast. So we'll make sure to link to Geraldine there if anyone listening is wanting to take a look. And any tips for anyone who is thinking about making this pullover?
Sure. So because I was a first-time designer for garments, I actually worked with a grader for this. So we have decided to make it a cropped sweater, but you could totally lengthen it in the body. Many of my testers did. I did fully test it, and it looks amazing, long or short, and it is knit bottom up. So you can just lengthen it before you join it. And for the pickup row, some of my testers put in a lifeline, some of them didn't. And I know that's probably the scary point. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I think one of the many excellent things about knitting your own jumpers is that ability to be able to change things like the length, isn't it? And it's always good to to kind of keep that in mind, I guess. So that's a good one.
I'm an impulse cast oner, so sometimes I'll cast on and I'll forget to look for things like that.
Yeah, same. Yeah. I'm really good at starting things. I'm amazing at starting things. Finishing them, not always great. It's just too exciting sometimes.
I need to plan a little bit better sometimes.
Yeah.
Buy enough yarn for that longer version.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, maybe do a little better with the sort of weighing of something and making sure that I do have the amount of yarn I need for the thing. Yeah, but it's okay. It's all, you always learn something, don't you? Even if
it's true. Yeah.
Even if it doesn't quite work out how you'd planned.
Yeah. And I wear many things anyway, even with all the issues.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. I feel like there's a lot of joy to be had in these things, regardless of if it goes off schedule or off piste, maybe more accurately.
Yeah, and I think that's my goal with this design is just show the great joy that is being Taiwanese American in Los Angeles.
Yes,
that's really what I was going for, that feeling of joy when you take that first sip.
Yeah, well, if having that first sip is anything like looking at this gorgeous jumper, then I feel like it's pretty great.
Thank you.
I'm looking to my left because I actually have a copy of the magazine here, which I know you haven't got yet. But yeah, it's so gorgeous. Brilliant. Okay, so you are no stranger, of course, to podcasts and vlogs and similar, because you are a regular vlogger yourself with your Thoughtfully Made Fiber videos. And we wanted to talk a bit about that and ask you what you enjoy most about making the videos and what you've learned whilst making them.
I really love to watch video podcasts for fiber folks. because I think our medium for art is such a visual one. Yeah, I really love the ones where the vlogcaster disappears for like 3 months and then they come back and have this long, massive trek of a video to watch, and then I could break it up into a few days and watch them. I really love getting into people's process of not only what patterns they're using, but the fibers they're choosing. And early on in the pandemic, I was feeling so like craving that in-person connection of getting to touch other people's yarn in the yarn shop while they're knitting and see what they were working with. And I just really wanted to create a space where I could do that with people that I know online and share all the things that we're up to and participate more online in these more visual experiences. And it's a really amazing community, YouTube podcasters. I've learned a lot, not only making my own podcast, but also watching others and listening to feedback from others about mine. I learned to spin off of YouTube podcasts because of other podcasters showing what they're doing, because I learned to spin alone in pandemic. Yeah. So it's just one of those amazing experiences where we can start to replace a little bit of that in-person connection. And I think that's the thing that I learned the most from it, is finding ways to connect regardless of what's happening in the world, and finding ways to connect with people across the world who I might not have otherwise been able to see face to face.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. I think you're so right about a lot of what we do as craftspeople is so visual. And Sophie and I often make jokes about knitting podcast being kind of a funny thing, like, because we'll be like, trying to sort of describe something that would be much easier shown. So yeah, I mean, I think actually being able to sort of hold something up and show it to your audience has got to be like maybe a little bit more straightforward sometimes.
That's true. That must be tough, but it might be a fun limitation too, because it forces you to really think about what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think knitting.
Yeah. I think sometimes things like that can help you sort of think about, like, how would I describe this wool? Like, if I can't just show it to someone, like, how do I say what it feels like or what it looks like, or like what the color kind of makes me think of? And I guess when I was living in London and commuting into the office every day before the pandemic, podcasts were great for when I was sat on the bus. But now, of course, things are so different that watching more content is so much easier, like now for me, than it would have been before.
That makes sense. That might be why I think video podcasts for crafters have really taken off in the last year. Really, really taken off. There's so many new ones.
Brilliant. Yeah. It's just so wonderful, isn't it? Because I suppose as a maker, if you're somebody like yourself who is a knitter and has started designing, and then it's kind of there's something quite natural about going ahead and making another thing, making a vlog, because it's again a creative process that kind of centers around this other creative process and sharing that with people.
Yeah, I like all forms of storytelling, so it's good to exercise my mind a little bit and try to tell the story in a way that video to me does not come naturally at all. So it kind of stretches my brain in a different way and gives me a break from the spreadsheets.
Right. Yeah. It's a different kind of challenge.
Yeah.
And as well as your vlog, you have a wonderful blog. I love all these different words that describe slightly different storytelling mediums.
It's really hard to keep them straight. Podcast, vlogcast, vlog, blog.
I know, there's so many of them. But yes, I would absolutely recommend. I mean, I had a real deep dive on your blog preparing for this podcast, and it was, one of the best things about my job is having like a good excuse to like really go ahead and read lots of really interesting things that people like yourself have written, and I really enjoyed it. And we will link to it, of course, but I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the blog and how you started it and the process of creating it.
Sure. When I first started doing this blog, it was actually, a lot of this content was actually in the form of stories on Instagram, which for those who might not be familiar is a visual format where you type out the words or you say it and caption it, and then it disappears after 24 hours. But your followers who have seen it will have read that information, but then it's just gone. And I had been doing this for years and years and years, talking about racism and homophobia and things. But finally, I asked, hey, should I put this somewhere permanent? And my followers were like, yes, please put it somewhere permanent so we can read it. And I think becoming a designer in this business is really interesting because immediately as you start to submit to magazines, you'll see things that you didn't before. And even though, for example, a bunch of magazines might look very similar in their quality and their aesthetics and the level of editing, working with each one is like working with a different person. They all have such distinct behind the scenes personalities. And I've been very lucky to work with a few organizations so far, including Pom, which, by the way, for anyone, Pom is the easiest to work with. It has just been the most delightful experience, honestly. But I wanted to make sure that that people who are reading the magazines understand that there's a lot that goes into it, and that making sure that organizations are run equitably from the top to the bottom, and that designers and photographers and dyers and all the creatives who work on a piece of art should be compensated fairly. And that's kind of how that first post came about, because that is not the case in our industry in many organizations. And Lydia, you know that I would not come on here and talk about this if Pom were not paying me equitably. But there have been cases where I receive offers and I'm like, that's like $2 an hour. You know, it's really disappointing in this industry. And I think it's difficult because we all just want to be friends and share our crafts and get along. But not getting paid equitably would mean that I burn out and leave the industry because I need a job. Yes. And I need to support my family. And for people who come from historically marginalized communities, that can be a huge barrier to entry. And I think it's a huge shame that we're probably losing a lot of great talent to burnout, people who will leave the industry because they can't make a living. So that's kind of how this blog came about, just trying to move the needle a little bit towards a way of thinking that can help people thrive in the industry and not just exist and survive and fight for just being here.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I really love about what you do is this sense of accountability and sharing information that is so important, because, you know, like in many industries, there's a lot of things that aren't widely known or aren't widely talked about. And I think, you know, we're only as good as the people who work with us say we are. And, you know, there's no world in which I would think that we're perfect. But I think it's always wonderful to hear that someone's had a good experience working with us. And obviously that doesn't mean that we can just rest on our laurels and think like, cool, you know, everything's finished. But it's like it's good to know what you're doing wrong, and it's good to know what you're doing right. And, or like, you know, there's not often a sort of definite, this is wrong, this is right. But, you know, like
yes, exactly.
What's working, what's not working, you know, what's making people feel like they can access working with us, what's perhaps preventing that, you know, how can we work towards being more and more equitable?
Yeah. On my blog, I try to make it very clear that on the individual level, there's no such thing as perfection. And I don't think there is on the organizational level either, but there's no such thing as the perfect designer who's perfectly equitable and fits all of your marginalized minority boxes. There's no such thing as the sustainable yarn, although there are sustainable options. For example, one of my posts talks about how there's lots of barriers to entry to what we consider more sustainable yarn options. Some people might have a medical need, some people might not be able to afford natural fiber. All these kinds of factors play into the choices that we make, and we can only really try our best to do a little bit at a time and try to move the needle slightly.
Yes, of course, yes. And I think anyone listening to this, hearing you speak about these things, I would absolutely recommend that they go ahead and read your blog and check out your vlog, because there's a real wealth of really interesting, thoughtful writing. So yeah, I would say it's a good place to spend a good couple of hours like I did. Could do a lot worse. Great. So we often like to round up our interviews these days by asking our interviewees, what are you excited about right now? It doesn't have to be craft related, of course. If it is, that is more than acceptable. But we'd love to hear, what's kind of really getting you excited.
Sure. And it is craft related. So lately, I've been really enamored with unspun yarn, particularly the one called Nutiden. It's from a small Swedish mill, and every color is unique because they'll pick a bunch of fleeces, like a bale of fleeces, kind of touch it and see what kind of characteristics it has. Like it might be an old heritage breed that's a little more toothy, or it might be like a fine lamb's wool, and they'll dye that batch based on what they think it's going to be really nice as, and every color is unique and only is sold for a month.
Wow.
And then every month there's like a handful of colors, and each one is unique from each other also. And it's just this really interesting experience for me as a spinner, because as a spinner, I'm used to touching, like single breed fibers. And then it's really interesting to see how it spins up. But then Nutiden kind of gives you the experience without being a spinner. It's kind of like spinning without spinning. You get kind of sucked deeper into the fiber vortex and real deep into the experience of touching unspun fiber. And I'm really enjoying working with that. So I think that's probably going to be this year, is just working with all of those like really small farm, small mill type fibers for me.
Brilliant. I will have to check that yarn out. I have to say I haven't come across it before, but it sounds interesting.
It's delicious.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So I think that brings us to the end there of the questions that we had lined up for you. But before we say goodbye, I just wanted to ask you to let everyone know if they want to find you online on Instagram or on your website and so on. Where should they go?
So again, thank you for having me on. My name is Aimee Sher, and you can find me pretty much everywhere by that handle. It's spelled, I'm sure you'll have it in the description and the blog, but at Aimee Sher Makes is my handle on social media, on Instagram and Etsy and Ravelry and all those places. And my website is aimeeshermakes.com. You'll find summaries of my patterns and my blog and all those things there. And I look forward to getting to know some of your readers a little bit better, because I think Pom Pom has such a diverse and engaged readership, and it's they always come up with really interesting and fun yarn combinations. So I love seeing every issue, not only what's in the issue, but what all the different creators and knitters come up with. So I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of this issue, and also what all the fans make from this issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly one of the things that Megan and I talk about quite a lot. Is just so exciting to see what people do.
You do feature fan made things. I think I was featured before I was a designer.
Yeah, you were. Yeah. No, we love it. It's just, it's so, it is that kind of sharing the joy of it. And when people come up with a color combination that you're just like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. And it's just so exciting, I think.
One of my testers knit this sweater with a contrast yoke, also from Wandering Flock, and a third color as the ruffle, all from Wandering Flock. And it's just got me like deeply regretting my life choices. I think I might need one too.
Sounds like you
So
might.
that's
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah, it's just exciting to see the ways people can take like a single color sweater and just turn it into this beautiful multicolor, beautiful work
Absolutely.
of art.
Yes, I love that. I love that about it. And I'm also very excited to see, what people do with your design and with all the other designs in the issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for making the time to join us today, or to join me today. I keep saying us because I'm so used to it. But us as Pom Pom, me as Lydia, and it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
But what a delight. Thank you, Aimee Sher. Thank you, Lydia, for being such a fantastic interviewer, taking us through Aimee's world of designing.
So thanks again to Aimee for taking the time to talk to me. It was such a pleasure. And thanks, of course, to all you Pomcats for listening.
Wonderful. So that's it for this episode. Just a reminder that the episode was sponsored by Chrysalis Yarn Company, and you can visit chrysalisyarns.com or check out their Instagram at chrysalisyarns.co to see their amazing yarns and beautiful colorways. We will have links to that on the show notes. As always, find them on the Pom Pom blog, and we'll have all the details about this interview and about our lovely sponsor too.
And now we say bye.
Yeah. Catch you on the flip side.
Bye.
Bye. Pomcast is produced by Lydia Gluck and Sophie Heathscott, along with the team at Pom Pom Quarterly magazine. You can buy your copy of the magazine and subscribe to our online shop. That's pompommag.com/shop.
Big thanks, as always, to Eli Block for creating the original music for this show and for being an essential part in creating this podcast. And thanks as well to Portmanteau Music for the tracks we used in this episode.
Thanks as always to Megan Fernandez, co-creator and editor of Pom Pom Quarterly. And thanks also to the whole Pom Pom team. What a great team they are. They help us produce this podcast and get it out on time.
They sure do. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, and why not leave a review? You know how many stars we want. Send any feedback or ideas to podcast@pompommag.com. And don't forget to keep in touch with us via the podcast group on the Pom Pom Ravelry Forum.